Hello everyone, Namaste. Welcome to my channel VPK Nutrition Mind Body Healing with Pushpa. I'm Pushpa and please stay tuned. Welcome back. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the 5 elements, the Panchamahabhutas in Ayurveda. And we're also going to talk about the body types as well as the food and how these elements are connected to both of those things and how they have an impact on our body and our mind. So what are the 5 elements? So let's start with the subtlest, which is the Akash or space. So space is also called ether. And what are the qualities of space or ether? First of all, it is very subtle, as I mentioned before, because you really can't see it, right? But we know there is space and everything exists in space. And of course, it is also very clear. It also allows for movement. Without space, things cannot move around. And then, of course, it is also a very expansive and it also gives lightness to the body. So the second element is Vayu or air. Vayu is a Sanskrit term for air or wind. And again, let's talk a little bit about its properties. So what are the properties of air that you can think of? It's very similar to Akasha. It's also very light and subtle. But you know there is a movement of air. So movement is part of air. And we can feel the breeze, we can feel the wind. So you have a little bit more awareness of what air is. And of course, there's air all over. That's what is responsible for a lot of the movement in the atmosphere as well as in our own bodies. And again, it is also very cooling, right? We always have, when you get air, we feel colder, we feel cooler. On a hot day, we're always looking to put the fan on because it makes you cooler. So that's something that we need to remember. Third element is fire or Agni, as it's called in Sanskrit. So what are the properties of fire or Agni, right? First thing you think of fire is hot, always hot. And of course, with hotness comes intensity. So definitely when you think of fire, it is very intense and it is also very subtle and it also spreads quite a lot when there's a lot of air around it. And again, it also burns things. Of course, fire also gives you light, which is an important, the positive aspect of fire. And of course, it can also burn things, whereas it is outside in the impurities or it is impurities inside the body. Fire is very important. Now again, fire becomes very relevant when I talk about food and digestion. And we'll talk about that much more later on in this video. Fourth element is water. It's also called Apaha or Jala in Sanskrit. So what are the properties of water? The fourth element, right? It is called Apaha or Jala. I already mentioned that. It is, first of all, liquid in nature, meaning it can flow. It's a fluid and it can be cold. It gives moisture to the body. It gives moisture to anything. It's also used to clean a lot of things. It's a purifier. And also it is somewhat heavy, not as heavy as earth, but definitely heavier than air, space, or Agni. The fifth and last element is earth or Prithvi. So what are the properties of earth? Earth or Prithvi is obviously solid. It's gross. It's not subtle. It definitely gives stability to anything. It is the very nature of earth is ground or grounding. So it gives you grounding in the body as well as in the mind. And earth is very important also for stability and also for the nourishment of tissues. And so we've talked about the 5 elements. Now let's get on to talk about the body types. Now this is a very unique concept in Ayurveda, is the body types that I mentioned before. And that when you're born with a certain body type, and that is called the Prakriti. And when you are living through your life and there are some imbalances noticed in your body, then it is called Vikruti. So the Prakriti of a person is very important to understand. And this is what gives the nature to the person, how they behave, how they act, how they digest their food, what they are drawn to. So all of these things are determined by the Prakriti or the body constitution. Now, again, this body constitution is made up of the 5 elements, and usually there are a couple of dominant elements in the body, which is what makes them different from the others. So every person is a unique combination of all these 5 elements. So the first body type that we'll talk about is Vata body type. So the Vata body type is a combination of air and space element dominant in them. I mean, they have all 5 elements, but these 2 dominate. And how do these people look like? Now, when you look at them, they're usually very skinny people, the small framed people, the people who can never gain weight, even if they wanted to. Right from childhood, they've always been very skinny. And again, they always like to walk fast, talk fast. They're very, very enthusiastic. And they also love to keep on changing because they are a combination of air and space. So they take on the qualities of these elements. So air is always moving, it's cool. So naturally, they love to keep on moving. They always like to keep changing things. So they never stick to one thing. They like to change jobs, they change friendships, they change places. They love traveling, obviously, because travel is ultimate movement. And of course, they also like to stay active all the time. So they are constantly running or doing marathons, and all of these things are drawn to these kinds of things. So that is their nature or their personality. They're also extremely creative. So they have so much of ideas, so many ideas all the time. The only problem is because they keep changing, they may never complete a project that they take on. So those are some of the qualities of Vata. Now again, if the Vata gets imbalanced, what happens is they usually respond to stress with anxiety, or become nervous, they become fearful, and also very insecure. They're also very sensitive because remember, air is very sensitive, right? Air picks up all of this scent that it goes through. If it goes through a garbage, it's going to pick up that scent. It goes through a rose garden, it picks up the scent of the rose. It's similar to that. A Vata personality is also very sensitive, and it'll pick up subtle energies as they move along in the world. So this is the Vata nature. And again, when it comes to food and digestion, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the third segment when we talk about that. So the second body type is Pitta, and the Pitta is a combination of fire and water dominance. So think about the qualities of these 2 elements, right? We already mentioned that before. The fire is very hot. Fiery nature, a person with a fiery nature, very passionate, very intense. They love to just focus on one thing and spend hours doing that, right? They're also extremely intelligent because fire is responsible for digestion, so digesting thoughts and everything. So they're very intelligent people. And again, they can sit for hours doing a project and even forget to eat sometimes. So these are the people who have interest in learning a lot of things. These are the people who love numbers and very logical, very analytical in nature. They're also very argumentative. They like to put across their point. They may never agree with anyone else, but they pretty much like to argue about everything. And of course, when it comes to a stressful situation, they always respond with anger, irritability, or even sometimes sharp tongue. That is usually referred to a Pitta person. And again, these are the typical type A people that a lot of us do know. But again, it's a fantastic personality as well because they're very driven and they can do a lot of things as well. So if you can take the heat, they're fantastic to be around because you can learn a lot from them. So again, we'll talk about food and digestion later on, and how the Pitta person relates to digestion as well as food. Okay, so the third personality, that's the Kapha person, right? They are the combination of earth and water. They are stable. They're the little larger frame, the jolly people that you know. They're always on the heavier side. Even as a kid, they were a chubby kid. They're always a little bit overweight, but they're very sweet. They have a round face, beautiful eyes, very soft, loving eyes, very kind, affectionate people. They give you those warm hugs. And again, remember, Earth is very stable and grounded. So naturally, they also like to be grounded in the sense that they don't like to move. So doing exercise, very difficult to do. But once they get started, they have amazing stamina, so they can actually keep going. And again, everything is slow about them. They move slowly, they talk slowly, and of course, they have a beautiful voice. Very, very sweet voice. A lot of times, they're all musicians. Now again, if they have a lot of stressful situation or there's an imbalance in kapha, then they could get into depression. They could get very attached to people. They could get very possessive. And so a lot of these other issues can come when the kapha is imbalanced. The one thing I do like to mention before we end today is talk about digestion. So the Vata, Pitta, Kapha has different kind of digestions. So Vata digestion is very erratic. I said they're always changing and moving. So naturally their digestion is also very erratic. So it is called Vishama Agni. So which means sometimes they're very hungry, sometimes they're not hungry at all. They forget to eat. They're usually grazing all the time, all through the day because of this kind of fluttering hunger. The second type, which is called Tikshna Agni, is what is seen in Pitta. Tikshna is sharpness, Pitta is sharp. So they have very strong digestion, very strong Agni when in balance. So they can pretty much digest everything. So no matter what they eat, you won't even see it in their body. You know, they can eat so much food, and especially when they're hungry, then they can burn it off. So no issue. And again, I'm talking about when you're balanced. Now the third kind of Agni is Manda Agni, which is what is seen in Kapha person. Because when they have a slow digestion, manda means slow digestion. So it'll take a few hours for them to digest the food that they eat. They usually feel sluggish after eating. So these are the people who can actually skip a meal and have no issues at all because they don't feel hungry at all. And that's perfectly fine. So these are the three types of Agni. Again, we will discuss a lot more details later on. And I just want you to see the connection between the elements, the body type, and the foods, and how it impacts a person's body. So we're going to end with this today. Thank you for joining me today on this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. And join me again next week. We will talk a lot more about the food, the tastes of food, and how they relate to our body.